So, when really thinking about the environment issue, where BELMO says that we need to change the environment, which I've kind of always been in agreement with that. And the reason I disagreed with his take on it is because it feels like for the last 10 ish years, they've been trying to do that. Specifically, more so like the last 5 years, they've really been focused on changing the patterns and whatnot. But here's the real issue. The real issue is actually with the environment. The reason why the urethane balls do what they do, they carry oil down so much more nowadays than they did back then. Because I just saw somebody's comment where they're like, well, the old bowling balls, the old urethane balls didn't flare. And, you didn't see the issue of them tearing up the lanes or carrying it down too much back then. And the thought about it is you're right. Like, you're absolutely right. And the reason is because the sheer volume of oil that we use now is completely different. Like when you're talking about the oil that's put on the lane back in the day, I mean, we're literally talking a thimble across the entire lane. And now it's more like a science tube full. Like it's a big, like it's a lot more. It's like it's a small amount of mil versus the 35 mil that you see on PBA patterns a lot now. And that's way more than what your typical house shot is, because your typical house pattern is like 24 on average. So you add 10 more microliters to the lane, and now, your ball's close to rooster tailing. So these big, giant urethane cover stocks are literally, almost literally rooster tailing through the front part of the lane, picking up all that oil. And because they don't flare, it's just dropping it or just kind of smearing it down lane. And for those of you that are new to this party and haven't really seen the last however many videos talking about this subject, the reason the low flare ones actually move the oil more than the high flare ones is because when the bowling ball flares more, and the flare is those rings you see going around the bowling ball, the oil rings, when you see them spread out a bunch, those are higher flaring rings. Those are higher flaring balls. So that's basically the ball rotating each time. So every time it gets off that oil, it's rotating onto a new part of the ball. So the high flaring balls don't carry the oil down like low flaring balls, because low flare balls or these urethane balls are tracking basically on the same part of the ball all the way through the lane. So that oil is just being pushed down lane. But the sheer amount of volume we use on these patterns is really why that happens. A lot of the times you don't see it as much on like house patterns and stuff, even though there's quite a bit of volume in the middle of the lane. When somebody's generally in league trying to use a urethane ball, they're not usually trying to hook it at all. They're not trying to play that 14, 15, 16 range and throwing it to 8, 9, 10. Generally, those guys are trying to play it straight. They're trying to play up that 8, 9, 10 range, just up the boards. And it's all kind of dry right of that. So the urethane on league helps them blend all that dry to the right, but then it just holds in the middle. They never have to worry about it. And that's why you see guys like, one of the local guys here, Thomas Smith. He comments on my Facebook and whatnot. So shout out Thomas for, always engaging. But he likes to throw urethane. If I remember correctly, he likes the Pink Widow. If I remember right, I think he uses that one quite a bit. But he likes to throw it hard and straight. But anyway, so the point of this video is to talk about what can be done to change the environment. And I really do think, I think it just, the problem we have is you've got too much oil on the lane. And because there's too much oil on the lane, that makes the friction down lane that much more sensitive. And that's what causes people to want to use urethane. The problem is, and then when you use short patterns, it's the same thing. Short patterns still got a ton of volume on the lane. So your ball is super responsive to friction, because once it comes out of the oil, it sees dry and it wants to react off of it. But the problem you run into if you lighten the volume up, say you use a longer pattern with lighter volume, the problem you run into then is people start getting too far left too fast. You're starting to use reactive a little bit more, but then you're starting to get back into that whole complaint where everybody's like, well, now we can't beat the two-handers because they're lofting it and we don't have the rev rate to loft it and stuff. So, that's always, we're kind of always in that part. So at the end of the day, how do you figure it out? Like, I think USBC did a pretty good job with like the Masters or in the US Open patterns and stuff. It really forces you to do different things. And urethane isn't always the best option. I think Jason is right to the fact that it's not a ban that's needed, and I don't think a ban is needed. But as far as the environments go, we need to make it to where, sure, if you want to use urethane, that's an option and you have the choice to use urethane. But if the environment makes it to where using urethane is not the best option, then if you use urethane, then good luck, type of thing. And I think the perfect example of that was the Players' Championship. So what was different about that pattern? Like I want to go pull those patterns up, and I want to look at that pattern and look at it compared to a lot of the other PBA patterns, and just take into consideration the surface and everything that we bowled on. Why? I mean, urethane was usable there, like early, but you had to get out of it fairly quickly. Like you couldn't use it the entire time in most cases. I mean, you could. Like, you definitely could. The scoring pace was low enough to allow you to stay in it and just kind of keep it in front of you or whatever. But generally, most people were kind of opting out of it after game one or so. So it was kind of nice to see an array of different bowling balls going down the lane and different people playing different parts of the lane and stuff. And so, scoring pace was low and it was definitely a shot maker's paradise. Like, it was just really about keeping the ball in front of you and making sure you're making quality shots. It didn't feel like it was just kind of like stand left, there's hook to the right because it's been developed there, and there's hold in because urethane early was creating the hold. But now you got to figure out how to get your ball to go through the pins the right way. And I'm not a big fan of environments like that. It's okay every once in a while, like having high scoring events like that is going to be cool. But in those situations, those types of environments, it is going to be very tough to beat the high rev rate type guys. They're going to get those off hits just a little bit more frequently and stuff. So, for me personally, I probably will. I think Jason kind of sparked a little bit of a fire under my ass there when he actually mentioned the U.S. Open that I led a couple of years back. And he made me remember that. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, I mean, I was lofting the gutter cap, playing basically a fallback, and I struck more than everybody in the building. So what did I do differently then that I'm not doing now when I get into those situations? Because there was oil in the front of the head pin there. They were super tight down lane. All I did was just keep it in front of me. Granted, the scoring pace was lower. So when the scoring pace is lower, it's not like you've got to look for 240. I think I averaged 225-ish or something to lead that block. But again, lower scoring pace. So when the scoring pace is 240, I don't know that that'll necessarily work, but at least then maybe it's just a minor change, trying to think of the same type of mindset of that ball motion, but then finding just a little different layout maybe. I don't know. I have to do some experimenting. I have to think about that just a little bit more, but that conversation with Jason really opened my mind a little bit more, had me thinking about some things, and I do think he's right about the environments needing to be changed. The problem is I'm not sure personally. I don't know which direction to go. I don't know. I would have to do a lot of testing. And I'd love to be one of the guys that was involved in doing that stuff. But, obviously I don't work for Kegel. I don't work for USBC or anything like that. So I would, what I really want to do is once I get all this stuff going with the projects that I have, and once I sell enough of them, I'm going to take that money. I'm going to open the training center that I keep talking about. And I'll buy a couple of different oilers. I'll get a Brunswick machine. I'll get a Kegel machine. And I'll just be doing all kinds of testing on my own. I'll be the research guy myself. I don't care. But that's where I'm headed with it. I just love to see the game evolve. I love to see things get better. I want to see the PBA thrive. I want to see USBC get more members. I want to see people start to support the sport a little bit more. So whatever it means, integrity, figuring out what's good for the sport in the long run, figuring out how do we make sure our youth are developing to, good bowlers down the road, not just kids that are just feeling like they're going to just throw urethane everywhere. Like, how do we do this? How do we go down this road? So I don't know, just another video of me thinking out loud basically, but I know some people like seeing this. So here you go. Here is your stuff for the day. So I don't know. We'll see you guys later.